Dawn struggled to break through the smoke as the English countryside lay bruised beneath a thin grey sky. The date was September 6, 1940, a morning that smelled of cordite, wet soil, and burned aluminum. Somewhere above the clouds, a lone Spitfire limped home. Its fuselage was scorched black. One wing dripped fuel. And the cockpit canopy glowed orange from the fire crawling along the engine cowling. Inside, Pilot Officer David Tresillian Hunter fought to stay conscious. Flames slid across the windscreen. The heat blistered his gloves. His controls trembled as if the aircraft itself was begging to give up. Below him stretched a patchwork of English fields he might never touch again. Behind him, a BF109 closed in, confident, steady, ready to finish the kill. Hunter knew he had seconds, maybe less. The fire ate deeper. The oxygen thinned. The Spitfire's nose dipped, smoke trailing like a dying comet. And then something happened that German pilots would later describe with one word, unmöglich. Impossible. Hunter rolled the burning Spitfire upside down, and aimed straight back at his pursuer. The moment set the stage for everything that followed. The summer of 1940 had become a season measured not in weeks but in sorties, losses, and the rising hum of incoming engines. Britain stood alone now. France had fallen. The Low Countries were occupied. And across the Channel, the Luftwaffe gathered in numbers the world had never seen assembled for a single purpose: crush the RAF, clear the skies, and pave the way for invasion. Every morning began the same way: sirens, scrambling feet, propellers clawing at dawn air, and every evening ended with the question no one dared voice aloud: how many didn't return? The Royal Air Force was stretched thin. Training schools rushed pilots into cockpits faster than instructors could brief them. Many of these young men had logged barely 10 hours on a frontline fighter before being thrust into a battle that demanded perfection on the first day. Mistakes weren't lessons. They were epitaphs. The Luftwaffe knew this. German intelligence reported that British squadrons were fragile, overworked, and beginning to crack. Their strategy for August and early September was brutal in its simplicity: overwhelm, isolate, and destroy. But Britain still had one thin line of defense: its fighter wings. And at the heart of that line was a machine that would become legendary: the Supermarine Spitfire Mki. Fast, graceful, responsive, the Spitfire was everything a pilot could hope for. Yet even this aircraft had vulnerabilities. Its coolant system was delicate. The fuel tank in front of the cockpit was exposed. A single incendiary round in the wrong place could turn the machine into a torch in seconds. Pilots called it the coffin tank. Every man who strapped in knew it. This was the world David Hunter flew in. He had joined the RAF with the quiet determination of someone who never bragged, never boasted, but seemed to shine in moments others avoided. His instructors described him as calm under pressure, precise in maneuvers, and almost unnervingly focused in emergencies. These weren't flashy traits. But they were the traits a man needed to survive the Battle of Britain. On the ground crews worked with the urgency of surgeons in a field hospital. Hurricanes and Spitfires rolled and riddled with holes, scorched, leaking, missing panels, and minutes later, after frantic hammering, refueling, and rearming, they rolled back out again. No one had the luxury of fear. Not the pilots. Not the mechanics. Not the commanders watching their strength shrink day by day. By early September, the Luftwaffe intensified attacks on airfields, radar stations, and sector HQs. Biggin Hill, Kenley, Hornchurch, names that would later become symbols, were nearly pounded into rubble. And it was on one of these pressured days that No. 54 Squadron, Hunter's unit, was scrambled again and again with barely time to breathe between fights. The fatigue was invisible in the official records, but it lived in every man's eyes. They were young, most barely in their 20s, yet aging faster than war should allow. Their bodies trembled from adrenaline crashes. Their uniforms smelled of burned aviation fuel. Their ears rang constantly from the unending roar of Merlin engines. Still, they flew. On September 6, radar picked up a formation heading toward the Thames estuary. 54 Squadron was ordered to intercept. The pilots climbed into their Spitfires, engines coughing to life. Mechanics slapped the fuselages as they rolled past, silent good lucks they weren't sure would be enough. The squadron climbed into the morning haze, sunlight glinting off their canopies. The world above 15,000 feet was deceptively quiet, soft even. But below that calm hung the constant tension of unseen danger. Somewhere out there, German fighters waited. Somewhere, a bomber's gunner traced the sky for shapes he could kill. Somewhere, a pilot was about to realize these were his last minutes alive. It was into this sky that Hunter rose, scanning the horizon, listening to the crackling radios, and feeling the familiar tightening in his chest that told him another fight was seconds away. And the moment the contrails of BF109s appeared ahead of them, streaking downward in their classic diving attack, the morning transformed from quiet anticipation to violent survival. The stage was now set for the encounter that would push Hunter and his Spitfire far beyond anything drills or training had prepared them for. The first seconds of every engagement decided the shape of the next minute. And the next minute often decided who would live long enough to see the ground again. As 54 Squadron tightened its formation and prepared for the clash, the sky fractured into spiraling trails, flashing reflections, and the sudden staccato of gunfire. The BF-109s dove hard, classic German doctrine. The aircraft were faster in the dive, heavier hitting, and flown by veterans who had carved their skills over Poland, France, and the Low Countries. These weren't inexperienced opponents. Many had more than 100 hours of combat flying behind them. Some were aces already. And they were hunting. Hunter broke left instinctively as tracers ripped past his cockpit canopy. In those moments, there was no time to think. The Spitfire became an extension of muscle memory: roll, pull, feel the pressure loading the wings. The Merlin engine screamed with each yank of the stick. What made the Spitfire exceptional was its harmony. The controls responded instantly, allowing the aircraft to twist, climb, and pivot far tighter than the BF109 at medium altitude. But the Messerschmitt had its own advantages: faster in the dive, stronger in the climb, and deadly with its 20mm cannons. A single shell could shatter a wing spar or ignite fuel. Hunter's squadron scattered, breaking the German attack. Pairs formed, dissolved, reformed. There was no front line here, only individual duels unfolding in a three-dimensional battlefield. Below them, the coastline blurred. Rivers, towns, fields, they meant nothing now. Then came the moment that changed everything. A 109 rolled in behind Hunter, closing the distance fast. The first burst struck his fuselage, climbing toward the engine. A second burst stitched across the cowling. And then he smelled it, a sharp, acrid stink that no pilot ever forgot. Burning glycol. Coolant leak. The worst kind. If the coolant drained out, the engine would seize in less than a minute. If a fire erupted, he'd have seconds. The Spitfire's coffin tank, sitting just ahead of his legs, was notorious for feeding flames right into the cockpit. Hunter shoved the stick forward, diving hard. The wind howled against the canopy. The engine coughed, temperature spikes flashing red on the gauges. Smoke curled around the edges of the instrument panel. He wasn't flying now, he was falling. The Merlin was dying. Behind him, the German pilot pressed his advantage, convinced the Spitfire was finished. To him, this was another victory in the making. But Hunter wasn't ready to die. He leveled out just above the cloud layer, heart pounding, trying to coax a few more seconds of life from the failing engine. He knew the rules: a coolant fire meant bail out immediately. A seized engine meant a forced landing. Either way, his fight should have been over. Yet something held him in that cockpit. A stubbornness. A refusal. A quiet calculation that he could still do something. Still change something. Another burst hit the Spitfire's tail. Fabric tore away. The stick trembled violently. And then, flames. A flicker. A growl. The fire took hold beneath the engine cowling, a glowing orange reflection dancing across his instruments. The cockpit temperature climbed sharply. Sweat rolled down his forehead. He should have bailed. Every pilot who survived similar damage said the same thing in their reports: don't wait. Get out. But the 109 was still there, still closing, still shooting. Hunter glanced at the altimeter. Too low for a safe bailout. Too fast for the parachute to open properly. He was trapped. Below him, the coastline slanted gently, revealing a patchwork of fields, hedgerows, and narrow roads. Somewhere down there, if he could keep the Spitfire alive for another 20 seconds, maybe, just maybe, he could attempt a crash landing. But even that seemed unlikely. His aircraft was now burning freely. Flames licked along the underbelly. Smoke ghosted through the vents. The Merlin sounded like a wounded animal. Yet through all of it, Hunter kept flying. Kept fighting the controls. Kept scanning for the 109 that refused to let him go. His Spitfire was dying. The German fighter was tightening its turn. And the battle was narrowing into one final, desperate confrontation. One that would push Hunter into an act so improbable that even German pilots would later insist the reports must have been wrong. The air inside the bunker grew heavier, almost as if the walls themselves were listening. Every man standing there could feel it: something was coming. Something far worse than anything they had prepared for. The colonel's breathing tightened. His eyes stayed locked on that metal door, the same door that moments ago had been silent, but now seemed to pulse with a faint, rhythmic vibration. A vibration that didn't belong to machinery, or footsteps, or anything human. A private stepped forward, swallowing hard. "Sir," the temperature dropped again. The colonel didn't answer. He just watched as a thin, ghostly mist leaked from the seams of the door, as though the cold on the other side wasn't natural, but alive. Then, a soft click echoed through the bunker. Not mechanical. Not accidental. It was deliberate, like someone, or something, unlocking the door from the other side. Every soldier raised his weapon. No one spoke. No one breathed. The mist thickened, swirling like pale fingers searching the room. Even the lights dimmed as if something was feeding on them. Another click. Louder this time. Slow. Purposeful. The colonel finally broke the silence. "Hold your positions. No one fires unless I say." But his voice wasn't steady. Because deep inside, he knew, whatever was about to step through that door, wasn't something bullets could stop. The final lock slid open. Metal groaned. The door inched forward, revealing nothing but absolute, unnatural darkness. And then, a shadow moved inside it. Tall. Slow. And aware of them. The soldiers staggered back, terror tightening around their throats. The colonel whispered, barely audible, "God help us." The shadow didn't rush forward. It didn't attack. That somehow made it even worse. It watched them. A shape without features, outlined only by the faintest shimmer of light bending around it, as if reality itself struggled to define what it was. The bunker fell into a suffocating silence. Every soldier stood frozen, not from discipline, but from the primal terror that crawled under their skin. Then the thing moved. Not with footsteps, with presence. As if it slid across space without crossing it. One moment it was at the doorway. The next, it was halfway across the room. Weapons snapped up instantly. Hands trembled. Fingers tightened on triggers. But no one fired. Because the creature wasn't attacking, it was observing. Scanning each man slowly, methodically, as though comparing them to something it remembered. Or something it hunted. A young private couldn't take it. He stumbled backward, gasping, his chest heaving like he'd suddenly forgotten how to breathe. The shadow turned toward him. Just the slightest tilt, but enough to make the entire room jolt with fear. No sudden movements, the colonel whispered. But his voice cracked. Even he could feel the pressure building, the crushing weight in the air that made every heartbeat louder and every thought harder to hold on to. The lights flickered. The temperature plunged. And then, the creature shifted again. Its shape stretched, elongated, as if peeling away from itself, forming a second silhouette behind it. Then a third. The soldiers' faces drained of color. They weren't looking at a shadow. They were looking at the beginning of many. The colonel's eyes widened. It's multiplying. The shadows stepped forward in unison, silent, slow, inevitable. And for the first time, a soldier broke rank and whispered exactly what the others were thinking: this isn't an attack. It's an invasion. The three shadows moved toward the center of the bunker, not with aggression, but with a terrifying purpose, as if claiming the space as their own. Every light bulb above them dimmed to a deep, choking red. The emergency lamps flickered like a dying heartbeat, stretching the shadows into impossible, twisting angles across the concrete floor. A sergeant tried to steady his breathing. He failed. It's too cold, he whispered. Frost crawled up the steel table beside him, spreading in delicate, branching veins, like something alive. Then one of the shadows stopped. Its form tightened, condensed, as if preparing to reveal something. The soldiers braced. The air hummed. And then, a face appeared inside the darkness. Not fully formed, just the faint outline, cheekbones, hollow eyes, a mouth slightly open, frozen in a silent scream. The men staggered back. Two dropped their rifles. One prayed under his breath. Because it wasn't just a face. It was human. And it looked like it was trapped, pressing outward from somewhere far behind the veil of blackness. Then a second face surfaced. And a third. Each one distorted, struggling, as if trying to warn them, or escape. What are they? The lieutenant choked out. The colonel swallowed hard. I don't think they're showing us themselves. He stepped closer, voice shaking. I think they're showing us, their victims. The shadows twitched. Their bodies folded inward, compressing like collapsing stars, and then expanded again, releasing a pulse of sound too low to hear, but strong enough to rattle teeth. The bunker walls vibrated. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The generator in the next room stuttered, and died. The room was plunged into absolute darkness. There was no glow. No red light. No silhouettes. Just breathing, terrified, scattered, uneven. For several seconds, no one dared move. Then, a whisper slid through the blackness. Not from any of the soldiers. Not from any human throat. Slow, dragging, like someone learning how to form words for the first time. We see you, a private screamed. Another fired blindly into the dark. Muzzle flashes lit the bunker in violent bursts, and for a fraction of a second the soldiers saw something that made their blood turn to ice. The shadows weren't three anymore. They were dozens. And they were all moving toward them. The moment the shadows multiplied, the bunker's atmosphere changed from fear to inevitability. Not one soldier breathed. Not one dared swallow. Even the concrete walls seemed to retreat inward, as if the structure itself understood that whatever had entered did not belong to this world. The creatures stood motionless, three silhouettes sharing one consciousness, one intention, one silent message: you are no longer alone. A vibration rippled across the floor. Not a quake. Not machinery. Something biological. Something alive. The men felt it through their boots, crawling up their legs, coiling around their nerves. The shadows inched closer. The captain finally snapped. He raised his rifle, finger tightening on the trigger, but the colonel grabbed his arm. Don't, he hissed, his voice cracking under the weight of dread. If that thing wanted us dead, we'd already be gone. The captain's eyes darted around the bunker, as if searching for a single escape route. There was none. Then one shadow broke formation. It stepped toward the center of the room, calm, deliberate, as if inviting the soldiers to witness something. Its edges began to shift. Flicker. Distort. And then, the silhouette compressed. Folded. Collapsed into itself like a star dying in reverse. In an instant, the men understood, this wasn't a creature. It was an opening. A doorway forming in the shape of a man. The walls groaned. The lights flickered violently. Loose screws rattled on the steel tables. Sergeant Hale, usually unshakable, whispered, "Colonel, it's trying to pull something through." A low hum filled the bunker, not sound, but vibration. It rattled every rib, every tooth, every thought. Then a faint outline appeared inside the shadow doorway. At first it looked like another silhouette, taller, thinner, wrong. But as it took shape, a horrifying realization spread across the room like ice water. It wasn't something coming through. It was something trying to enter our shape. Our dimensions. Our form. A figure forcing its way into existence one impossible inch at a time. The colonel stumbled back, whispering, "Everyone stand fast. We're witnessing the beginning of contact." The soldiers knew he was wrong. This wasn't contact. It was penetration. A breach. A crossing. The shadow creature's form sharpened, not fully human, not fully anything. And as it stepped forward with its first impossible, half-formed foot, every light in the bunker exploded at once, leaving only darkness, breathing, and the slow, deliberate sound of something new standing in the room with them. The wreck of the inverted Spitfire was dragged away from the grass hours later, its wings scorched, its cockpit twisted, its propeller bent into the earth like a broken clock hand frozen at the moment of impact. But what lingered was not the machine, it was the man who had refused to let physics, fear, or fire decide the end of his story. His impossible maneuver became one more thread in the vast, sprawling tapestry of the air war over Europe. A reminder that the battle was never just about technology, range, horsepower, or altitude charts. It was fought inside cramped cockpits by young men who often had only seconds to choose between life, death, or something in between. For the Germans who had watched him claw an upside-down aircraft back into the fight, the message was unmistakable: the RAF was not simply determined. It was unpredictable. Even when burning, even when inverted, even when every law of aerodynamics said the fight was over, a Spitfire pilot could still come back for you. And for his comrades on the ground, the story became something deeper. Proof that courage was not always loud. Sometimes it was silent, expressed only through a hand on a control column, a jaw clenched behind an oxygen mask, a stubborn refusal to surrender the sky. Years later, long after the war had ended and its roar had faded into textbooks and museums, veterans would still recall tales like this with a distant look in their eyes, not glorifying the violence, but honoring the moments when humanity revealed its sharpest edges and its brightest sparks. This one pilot, in one impossible minute of terror and clarity, had shown what the air war truly was, a place where survival often depended on instinct more than strategy. Where life could turn upside down as quickly as a burning aircraft. And where victory sometimes belonged not to the strongest or the fastest, but to the one who simply refused to fall.